Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment you are going to hear the voice of a man who will tell you some tremendously important facts.
Welcome to the Reality Revolution. Super excited today. I have a lifelong friend that is here to join us that has so much to offer and share. Chris Lahiff. Chris is a lifelong seeker for meaning and purpose in this world. And Chris is a certified spiritual practitioner, licensed through Centers of Spiritual Living, and currently in his final years of training at the Holmes Institute and Spiritual School of Leadership. He enjoys speaking and coaching and consulting, performance, meaning and purpose to bringing meaning and purpose to individuals and organizations. Is often featured on Insight Timer, facilitating live meditations. Chris's most recent undertaking is a co-founder and co-director of Soul Evolution Collaborative, an online interactive spiritual community. We are a part, Chris believes that we're a part of something bigger and wants to help you know that too. You can connect with Chris at chrislahiff.com. And I'm uniquely excited because Chris and I went to school together. Chris was always the cool kid in school. I was one of the nerds that was hanging out, and I always like, if I could just hang out with Chris for one day. A couple times there, I got a few chances, but now it's so interesting to go all the way back and see how our lives have evolved after growing up together. And we both have super similar interests. I've learned a lot from Chris. If you check out his YouTube channel, which I'll put in the links, and he has a unique understanding of the law of attraction, the science of the mind, and has put together some really interesting meditations. So I wanted to bring him on and talk about this a little bit more. So welcome to the Reality Revolution, Chris.
Thank you, Brian. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
It's an honor to have you, man. So you and I can totally understand where you're coming from and your upbringing and what kind of an environment you came from spiritually. So what is it that inspired you to go down this particular path to really investigate, research, and teach the science of the mind?
Wow, that's a really good question. I started kind of getting turned on to the ideas late 90s, and I was really wanting to go into that, and then I was always kind of distracted because I was still trying to be the cool kid and still doing the party and stuff, and that was a distraction. I was kind of like filling that hole with diversions, and so once I finally realized I needed to leave those diversions behind, it's when I rediscovered an old Wayne Dyer book that really is that's like the key that put me all on here. Mm-hmm. He had a quote. It was the book Real Magic, and he said, if there's things in your life that aren't going the way you want them to, like the number one thing he recommends right away is start a meditation program. And then he recommended Jose Silva, which I know you talk a lot about Jose Silva. He said, anything by Jose Silva is great. And so that put me on the meditation path. This was about 16 months after I left behind the party lifestyle. And I was really depressed at that point. But I knew I wanted to get back into what I was really turned on by, essentially Neil Donald Walsh, Conversations with God was the foundation, that finally something that resonated with me in 1999. And so then through getting into the meditation, the long story is my spouse was wanting something and suggested we try to find a church or something to go to. She had never had anything growing up. I will give Catholicism, for me personally, it instilled a deep faith in something, and something I always felt. And so to find Centers for Spiritual Living, essentially it was a friend of mine, an acquaintance through a 12-step group that said, hey, you guys might like my church. He didn't know that we were looking for a center or a church or anything. I had never heard of Centers for Spiritual Living before, but I'd seen that crazy, they call it the monolithic dome out in Lakewood for Mile High Church. And he's like, you should come check it out. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. We tried one already, Unitarian, that got too political for us. And even though, we agreed with the message, we still didn't want to go to church to get angry,
Exactly. And it's something that happened to me too. I was in the same part, searching out, going to different churches. And then I'm just sitting there and it's like Fox News for 30 minutes, and they're not really talking about what I was seeking,
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And so this guy, just out of the blue suggested I should try their church. And I was kind of like wary because we had tried one, and my spouse kind of like, yeah, maybe church isn't right, and so we just kind of forgot about it. But then he's like, yeah, and we get like really cool speakers there. Like Wayne Dyer was just there like a month ago. So I was like, what? Okay. So like, this is the sign. I need to go check it out. And I went on a Sunday to check out their Sunday service, and all the ideas of what the universe is, of what God is, of what we are, spirit, all of it, the oneness, that was the message. And it's a huge spiritual center. The sanctuary holds, I think, 1,500 people. So I'm looking around, and like, I thought I was like one of maybe a handful of people in Colorado that believed that philosophy. And here's hundreds of people, and it's being, spoken from on the stage. And so that's what put me there. And then it's just been great since then. I like you, I love all kinds of different ideas. This stuff just turns me on. I'm not nearly as proficient of a reader as you are. You blow my mind, your information. But what I really liked about Centers for Spiritual Living is once they have classes, and so then I got kind of on a structured format to learn, always doing homework, always learning the practices, and having a teacher that you could ask questions of, and then co-students. So for me, Centers for Spiritual Living and the Science of Mind, it just was the place to really get me on a path.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that you need to read a bunch of stuff. People may get the impression, oh, I need to go out and read a bunch of books like Brian. You really don't. Science of the Mind is a perfect course set up. If you go along the process, it'll teach you everything without having to read hundreds of books. That's the beautiful thing about it. It really makes everything simplistic and easy, and gives you a step-by-step process.
Yeah, I agree. If you get too scattered, too many different books, then you have different kind of programs overlapping. So,
and Science of the Mind was really started by a couple of authors, but Ernest Holmes is the one that people most likely will know about as the primary author. And I find his stuff fascinating and different than a lot of this stuff. And so I wanted to get your impressions of him just as an author, and the unique things that he might have added in your understandings as you've read his material.
Well, him as a person, like every once in a while you'll hear something like from his personal life, and so far, like everything I've heard has been just reinforces that, yes, he was absolutely tuned in to something bigger. He was influenced, all the early New Thought leaders. You share so many of them on your podcast, which I love hearing about all of them. Ernest Holmes, I really like. He gets a lot of credit for the idea of the golden thread of truth. If you look at like pretty much all world religions, faiths, indigenous teachings, philosophies, that there's certain things that are pretty much found in all of them. Like the golden rule is like a great example of that. And so he called it, it's the golden thread of truth that runs through everything. So I like him that he got credit for that, or gets some of the credit for that. One other thing that I really like about him, so there's Christian Science, which is similar. It's a New Thought philosophy, but they're very like rigid. It was Mary Baker Eddy was the founder of that. And so the reason, like they are the ones, they're not allowed to see a doctor. They're not allowed to take medications, because the belief is that demonstrates a lack of faith in God. And we do have the power to heal ourselves, which Science of Mind teaches as well. But what I really resonate with Ernest Holmes was the idea that everything is God, including healers, including doctors, including medications. If we have a headache, take an aspirin.
God gave us aspirin for a reason, right?
Yeah, you can absolutely sit down, do a spiritual mind treatment, and find relief. But if you need to bring in some other modalities, it's all God. So why wouldn't you?
Right.
So I like the practicality of Ernest Holmes.
How would you, because you've definitely been access to other stuff like The Secret and maybe reality transurfing. How would you differentiate it? because there are some things that he differentiated in his understanding of God and the universal mind and that kind of thing. What would you say the differentiations are compared to some other teachings?
Well, I think, you know, for me, one, I think I'm a little biased. And so I take in, rather than seeing like difference, I always make it
Right.
all similar. And so when I'm like, that's exactly what Ernest Holmes says. And then other people be like, oh, not really. I'm like, no, it is. And I'll, you know, explain how, you know, the idea, he was certainly about, you know, oneness, wholeness, that,
Right.
you know, he talks about the microcosm, the macrocosm. And for me, it's, I don't know how I would see.
Right. No,
Depends on what you, I don't know, like one thing that I maybe have a little bit of, Ernest Holmes didn't really believe in reincarnation. He believes
Right.
like in a constant upward movement. But from what I've, you know, found out so far is like, he did not think that necessarily we come back as somebody else, that we go on as ourself in a higher form or something.
Right.
And,
Which is the same as Neville Goddard.
Mhm.
And so, and it's not important either. You know, the teaching is still works and it's effective. Once you started applying these teachings, do you have any stories of something that might have happened to you that really said, whoa, this stuff is just more than stuff I'm reading. This stuff works.
Try to think of like any showstopper things. It's really, you know, I love how spiritual mind treatment has definitely come through for me, and like so many times,
Mm-hmm.
stuff that I've manifested in my life, you know, with houses, with, you know, cars, the lifestyle that I want, people, it has been a constant like upward movement once I've realized that. And it's, I'm trying to, you know, I didn't think of any like specific stories. I have, it's kind of funny, you know, sometimes there's the idea of be careful what you ask for,
Right.
that there's, you know, one of the like the most powerful, like one of the first times that I realized like, holy cow, like this is powerful stuff and you have to be careful, I was in one of my first like prerequisite classes before I went to practitioner training, and they have practitioners that were teachers assistants, and so they, you know, offered like, hey, you know, if you need like spiritual mind treatment, which is affirmative prayer, it's just our form of prayer that has kind of a system to it,
Right.
to help, you know, help with the efficacy. You know, feel free like during the break. And I was just like feeling like I was really plateaued and stuck. I was kind of like, you kind of start to get on a little bit of a high when you start getting into this philosophy and applying it and seeing things like come into your life, seeing things flowing. And then a lot of times you plateau and, you know, you kind of feel lost. Is this it? And I was just feeling like I was blocked in some way. And so I did a treatment, you know, I asked the practitioner to do a treatment for me to, you know, release the blocks, release what was holding me back. And this is one of those, like, be careful what you ask for, because it was that night so growing up, I had a lot of times where I don't know if angry person is the right word I would like to use, but I had a kind of like a temper. If I would get mad,
Right.
you know, in high school, like I had holes punched in my walls and stuff, which is, you know, it's embarrassing to admit to, but it was, you know, kind of a temper that was
Right.
within me. And I had gotten, you know, pretty good at this point, because at the same time that we gave up the party lifestyle, we were seeing a couples counselors, learning how to, you know, communicate better. And
Right.
yeah, I mean, I had to learn skills that I didn't learn before I started, you know, because I started the party life early, like at 13, you know.
Oh yeah, I remember. I tried to party too. I was there.
It was ridiculous. So anyway, that night, in the middle of the night, my spouse triggered me, woke up. So I was like kind of like in a fugue state. And I woke up in like such a amazingly like over the top, like my temper was like dynamite flared up, something that I hadn't experienced, since I had started, definitely not since Science of Mind. And it was like after we left the partying lifestyle, I was learning how, like, okay, how to recognize signs of temper, signs of stuff like that to catch myself. And it was the night of that treatment that something in me, like, it seemed like a different person. It was, undoubtedly the shadow effect, something that I had denied and like stuffed down in, and I hadn't really dealt with it. And so that treatment in my mind, without a doubt, brought that to the surface. But I didn't hurt anybody or anything, but it scared my spouse. And it was all like over in like literally about a second of this eruption. But it was that like intense that scared her. I had a newborn, my daughter was a baby, and that was kind of like what triggered it. It was my turn to get up and help her in the middle of the night. And in this fugue state, like this darkness that had been stuffed down for me came to the surface. And so it took some work, but up until that point, I didn't realize that I was still harboring that. So I'm certain that if it had not come up then, it was going to come up at some point.
Right.
I really think it was a catapult. It sent me into like, okay, here's where you have a lot of work to do. This is your block right now to deal with. So
it's interesting how what you're blocking is also a block. You know what I mean? We have all these emotions that we avoid. And if we just express those emotions, they go away. But a lot of times we're so scared of them. We're so scared of the hunger and anger and whatever it is, you know what I mean? That we avoid it. We don't want to talk about it. And then it just comes up later. And so sometimes these things, they're gifts. When you feel those emotions coming up, it's because it has to go somewhere. When it comes up, it has to leave, right? So a lot of times people get scared when they do a treatment like that and they suddenly feel anger or something like that, when in fact, where is it going to go? It's been in your body the whole time. It's been in there deep in the recesses. It has to go, it has to come to the surface in order to leave, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it can come out like that, like in a crazy violent eruption, or it can sit there and fester and maybe manifest as, an ailment, health problem. Yeah. So there's so much about just observing and being with all of it.
It really is. So there's a lot of different factors when you talk about this area of the mind. What is your opinion about relationships? Can you use this to find a specific person to fall in love with, or is it better applied in general to that person that you may not know? How do you apply it to love and relationships, or is that something that you're still learning?
Well, I think absolutely you can use it for love and relationships. I know for me, I always like the added kind of caveat, like this or something better.
This or something better,
like you might be thinking it's that specific person, and maybe that's what you're going to treat for. As a practitioner, like it's one, we don't ever treat, like if somebody came to me and said, hey, will you treat for so-and-so? I want them to be my partner, but I need them to change. Or like, would you, my brother's an alcoholic, would you pray for him to stop drinking? It's like, well, has he given me permission? Is he asking me to pray for that? Because we have to always keep in mind, like their sole purpose, their higher. We can't try to influence outside of what's been requested of us. So trying to attract like a specific person to you, it has to be in their alignment too. You're not going to draw somebody to you. We're taught in practitioner training to take that in mind and make that part of it. In my belief, you couldn't cross over like what that person's alignment is. But I would always, as we're, if I was going to do a treatment for somebody, if somebody asked me that they wanted to attract that specific person, I would make sure I put in caveats that is okay with that other person and their higher purpose, and also be aware that that person, maybe that's not the one that you actually want. What is it that you want? What do you want to experience with them? Let's treat for that and visualize that, and know that that partner or somebody even better is coming.
It's one of those things, once I started teaching this and started getting emails, it gets more emails on that. Hey, I love this one person. I don't care about anyone else. Please help me to find this one person. And we get into this tunnel vision where we think that is the person. When there's billions of people in the world and we really have no idea, there's somebody out there that could be so much better. It's one of those things that I've learned, that sometimes people come to you wanting things they don't really want. They think they want them, and you can't tell somebody what they want. So I think what you're talking about is you craft your treatment so they get the perfect thing for them, even if it's not what they necessarily know that they want, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think getting to the why of it is important. That idea of
Right.
like, so what is it you're looking for with that partner? Somebody that likes your interests, somebody that shares interests, somebody that likes to go hiking with you, somebody that relates to you. I think it's always trying to get to the why. Like, I'd like more money. Okay, why? Well, because I would like to be able to travel. Okay, why? Well, because I want to see more places and meet more people. Okay, and eventually you get to the, maybe it's not money that is the thing that's going to get you to that experience. Maybe that experience is trying to get to you through some other way that you're cutting it off if you're saying it has to be this way.
One of the most powerful questions that I've asked myself and others, if you have all the money, what are you going to do after that point? That's a question some people don't ask themselves. Once they start asking that question, you get some really powerful answers about what your true purpose is.
Yeah, absolutely. Because so much of it, like, you could be doing that right now without that money if you know what it is that you would do.
It's true.
Mhm.
It's the hardest, most difficult part of the world and system that we're born into on Earth. It's all about the money. It's what we think about from the moment we start to understand language, all the way that the reason that we're told we're going through school, the reason we're going through college, it's all about the money. And so that by the time we're done, we're trained for 20 years, it's all about the money. And so when we learn that we can create a reality, all we think about is, okay, I need the money, right? And it's just such a simple little thing that on the surface level that we're dealing with when we deal with prosperity and money. So for somebody that's struggling, that all they see is poverty around them, they live in a tough area, what would you say to that person, the person that's struggling and all they see is evidence of their struggle around them? You and I both know how powerful this is. What would you say to them?
That's always a tough one, of what do you say to somebody who's actually, like, kind of essentially suffering in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we, telling them that, it's abundant world and that they just have to think about it, and, something like that, it's not going to help them at all. One would be to, start paying attention to where they are more abundant than they maybe are noticing. Finding, like, the smallest thing. Do you have a pair of shoes that fits right now? Focus, okay, and put some gratitude, some attention towards that. Finding the little things that you're grateful for, and trying to counter, like, every time you have those feelings of lack, try to find something that you can counter it with. And knowing that you are moving in a direction that you want to, becoming aware that, okay, so maybe there is more to this, what we think creating our reality, than affirmations of, I am moving towards a life of more financial abundance. I'm moving towards that, and starting to act as that, as if, so many people get in the bad spots and you're kind of hopeless. And so it's hard to show up in a way that is going to attract other people to you. We're going to attract opportunities to you. And so I think it's important to know that you're moving in the right direction, act from a place of meaning and purpose is something that I'm really big on. In this last couple of years, something I've been focusing on is helping others find meaning and purpose in whatever it is that they're doing. So, if you're washing dishes in a restaurant, know that you are moving towards something bigger. And as you're doing that, bring that sense of a deeper meaning to everything that you do. And through that, you start to open doors just by showing up in a different way, and know that you're moving in that direction. Spiritual mind treatment, to know that you're moving in that direction, helps open up your subconscious, your RAS, the reticular activating system, to start also looking for the little opportunities. And it's amazing when you start shifting how you show up in the world, people notice, and things happen. That's
right. For a lot of people, as I've noticed, that are really struggling, you almost have to teach a level of insanity. Like, I want you to completely imagine you're not in the world that you're in. You imagine that what you see around you is abundance and prosperity. And for some people, it requires almost like they become an actor, like they're in a fantasy world. And some people would hear that and like, that's insanity, but that is what they need. They need to literally just forget about the present moment and all the struggles and things they're going through. And for some, especially for the people that are really struggling, it requires almost a temporary insanity where they fantasize and they see just goodness all around them when it's not actually the case, right? It's there's levels to it. But as I found, when somebody's really struggling and all they see is poverty and lack around them, they almost have to go through a period where they have to fool themselves into seeing something opposite. And it's not the same for everybody. I wanted to get your comments on that, because in some ways people say you're just teaching them to be insane, but really the result of that, after the fact, they start to envision this abundance. It starts to actually outpicture in their reality. And I wanted to get your feedback on is that going too far, teaching somebody just to imagine everything's perfect when it's not?
I think, as a technique, as a practice, I think that's wonderful. When we talk about manifesting law of attraction, the idea of a spiritual mind treatment, it's not the words that are doing anything. It's not the prayer that's doing anything. It's the words that get you to the feeling of experiencing something else within your consciousness.
Right.
And when you can really get your mind into that, like knowing in your mind that is there, it's existent in this mental realm. If you can get yourself into that place of truly knowing it, then the physical manifestation is inevitable. So I think that's a great practice. Even imagination is very, very powerful. Just find, coaching them to find somewhere to go be, where you see opulence around you, or even sitting in a park and just taking it in, that you are able to sit in a park for a minute and feel like the richest person on the planet,
right,
for that time. Just really go in and feed into it, and then know that can go with you. And then as you return back into your life, play it. I like the idea of what you're saying. What's coming to me now is play with it a little bit of a game. You're having this temporary experience, living as a pauper. Enjoy it.
Exactly.
Knowing that your pockets are full as soon as you're ready to go back to that abundance from which you came.
Now, in this timeline, we have a unique thing that we have to deal with social media and the news. We have to interface with a media that can be programming and negative, especially when we become aware of how the mind works. So what is the science of mind perspective on how to access the news and media when we go through 2 years of presidential campaigns, and then everybody has, even regular news, CBS, NBC, they all have an agenda. And so you get some people that are like, I never watch the news at all, and they completely don't know what's happening in the world. And then you get people that just live in their little reality bubble and only listen to things that affirm what they want to believe. What is your and Science of Mind's perspective on how to interact with the media and social media and all that stuff around us?
I don't know if there's an official Science of Mind take on that. You hear a lot of like be in the world but not of it. you have to know and stand, true in what you believe is the reality is. For myself, I know that, very much like, Bill Hicks, that it's a roller coaster. This is a ride. We're here just to experience it. That
Right.
there is no good, no bad. It's all just experience. And of course, we feel it as if it is very real, and we do feel that duality. So for me, like, I've gone through waves where, like, I know if I'm doing too much news, too much social media, that I need to, like, back out. And I used to do it every year for Lent. That was like, okay, for 40 days, I'm not going to watch the news. I'm not going to do Facebook. I'm just going to, fill that time that I would have done it with, grabbing a book or whatever.
Mhm.
And it feels good. When you're, like, kind of just doom scrolling, just constantly, like, flipping, like, just looking for another story that validates the story that we are telling ourselves, and it can suck you down into the muck for sure.
Mhm.
It's funny, one of our latest videos on Soul Evolution Collaborative, it was my job at the video, there's 3 of us. My video was to come up, our job was to come up with tools or applications. And so that was actually one of the subjects, and it was to counterbalance it, to bring in, if I'm going to take in 15 minutes of news, then when I'm done with that, I want to counterbalance it. I love the Good News Network, but, like, in my Apple phone, I can't make the Good News Network like one of my preferred networks. It's not an option. When you type
Right.
it in, it doesn't even come up. So it takes intention to go out there. There's so much really cool stuff going on in the world, but it's not fed to us the same way that the doom and gloom is, that, we get so much. So I think for me, it's reminding ourselves to counterbalance it. This reminds me very much of Abraham Hicks,
Mhm.
that tip those scales. If you're at 49.9 and 50.1, then you want at least more positivity going in than the doom and gloom. And if you're
Right.
doing that, then you're in the right direction.
And the tough thing, once you realize the science of the mind and what it's saying and experience it, um, everything is true. There's no fiction. So when you start looking at crazy stuff on the news, part of you, oh, of course, that's not true. They're not eating babies and stuff. And then, if you continue to believe that, mind is so powerful. Next thing you know, we're going to start seeing stories where they're eating babies, right? I mean, the thing, we need to take responsibility for the stuff that we believe. It's not just entertainment, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I love when you talk about, like, the multiverse as well. Like, as soon as you have that idea, like right now, then yeah, that exists. That is now there.
Mhm.
And, yeah, maybe if enough of us, or put enough energy into it and thought into it,
It'll
it will start
attract.
showing up in the news.
Right. So it's not about, oh, that's not true. It's all, but you better be careful because that'll become true. Right.
Yeah.
So um, one of the things that you have some really good meditations, and you do teach meditation. So first of all, from a personal perspective, tell me about your daily ritual and how you've integrated meditation into your daily life and what you do.
Mm. Well, my morning ritual is pretty much non-existent. It's reminding myself in the morning to be present when I remember to be present, because
Right.
my day starts as soon as it's okay. I gotta get up and get the kids ready to go get on the bus and go. So it's something that I'm more of a night person. So I usually stay up too late. That's usually when more of my spiritual practices come in, when everybody else has gone to bed. I'm not one of those, like, morning people that's able to get up at 4:30 in the morning for my
All my
practice.
Cheyenne friends are all night people. I don't think I've met too many. I don't know what it is about Cheyenne, but we're all night people.
Yeah, that's something I've yet to be able to switch. That
Which is fine,
when I
right?
first got into meditation, I was good about it. At that point, I was working, I was waiting tables at Racine's in Denver, and it was who's now gone, which is kind of sad. But
Yeah.
I had to be there at 6:30 in the morning, and so for those first couple of years of my meditation practice, I was getting up at 5:30, and I really love binaural beats. That was binaurals back then, and I still use them now, just in kind of the background. I like, transcendental meditation. Now that's supposed to be, a twice a day thing. I usually don't. Now that the kids are back in school, I'll start finding more time to do a morning one once they're gone. But I usually, find time either in the afternoon or evening. And then if not, then I make a point of always minimum 5 minutes, like every day I've got to check in. I do prayer every day, which for me, when I do prayer, I have to get myself into a meditative state, which it's, after, the practice, it's pretty quick, a couple deep breaths, and you can shift like pretty quickly. So it's not any regimented practice right now. It's kind of sporadic. I take it when I can get it. And I'm finding myself all over the place right now. Lots of, schooling, and Soul Evolution Collaborative, my children, and I'm the main kind of more homemaker part of our family. My spouse is the main breadwinner out there. So it's
right. But it's still very common. We live super busy lives. People are not meditating for 2 or 3 hours every day. So at least you feel that you need to dip your toe for at least 5 minutes, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just that.
When I don't, if it's just a couple minutes, if I don't, then I'll notice the next day, like something's missing just on the edge of my consciousness, even if I don't go into the silence, even for a couple of minutes. And it's amazing how sometimes that's hard, finding a couple of minutes when we waste a couple minutes all the time on our phone or whatever, you know what I mean? There's some part of us that is resisting deep down. And there's a little bit of a push on when we learn meditation. Does that make sense?
Oh,
maybe
absolutely.
That's a person, right?
Yeah. And then I wonder like what part it is that's resisting. Is it the ego that's
right,
afraid of losing its identity, how it is, even though the ego would benefit, when we remember to take those steps. And
so let's talk about the ego, a very popular discussion in the law of attraction and spiritual circles. And when I ask people, what is the ego to you? I get different answers. And some people, the ego is terrible. It's all bad. Some people say there is no ego. So what is your perspective of the ego and its interaction? Is the ego not our true selves? Is it a false self? Or is it our true selves, but inflated? How would you define your understanding of ego as we go through this process?
Well, I usually equate ego with I call it like my human thinking mind. There's the deeper mind. We're all connected to the one mind. Like all thought comes from thought, comes from the same spot. And then we have our free will, and we have our identity, or what we say is our identity, which is our human persona that changes from day to day. We can change our persona overnight if we want. So I see ego as an extension of that identity, that I don't think ego is bad. I think ego is, our protector, or helps try to protect us. The warning, like, don't go too close to that water. There's, there could be alligators in there. Don't fly too high because you'll fall, you'll crash. So like in this conversation, like, I think that's where the ego feels safe. It doesn't want to venture into the unknown. So it doesn't want you up leveling yourself. So as opposed to like, do I go and do my meditation practice, or do I go and scroll on my phone for a little while? The ego, in my take, is like, well, at least in the beginning, like meditation, I don't know exactly what that is. It seems a little unsure. So the ego part of us is going to say, just go scroll for a little while. It's a great way to pass your time. And I mean, honestly, you can get yourself into a pretty mindless state scrolling. I've heard like Netflix can be your mental escape if, it's very unintentional. And doesn't necessarily work for me, but again, it's a lot like alcohol and drugs as a way to kind of escape.
Right.
The
I think
ego
we're
likes to
constantly
go,
going into meditative states when we watch Netflix or Hulu or whatever it is. Especially when we're watching movies and stuff, I think that we love it sometimes because we're in a natural meditative state.
right?
You know, and our brain waves are at a different state. So the ego doesn't know the difference. It's one thing, and it's once, but there is so many aspects to this, and I wanted to get your perspective. Some people, like for instance, Neville Goddard was kind of like, affirmations really don't work. A lot, and some people will say, you only say the affirmation once. If you say it more than once, then you're showing a lack of faith. And then some people have really had huge transformations when they say it repetitively. It's something that just they beat down the door of their subconscious. And I've heard different perspectives from it's one of the main crux differences from different schooling on this spiritual idea of creation. So what is your perspective on affirmations?
It's a really good question. And the science of mind, I've seen kind of conflicting in that, even from like Ernest Holmes, that
Right.
Yeah, you're supposed to treat and release it, let it go, and that's
One
it.
treatment, and then that's it.
You get to the space where you know it, you feel it, and then let it go. And then
Right.
you don't, we use the seed, soil, plant analogy a lot. The seed is the thoughts that you're going to plant in the treatment. So you plant it into the soil, which is the creative mechanism of the universe, the subjective.
Mhm.
And then it manifests. So like when you plant a seed, you don't go digging it up each day to see if it's sprouting yet. And so, that very much resonates. And then at the very same time, though, Ernest Holmes says, you treat until you demonstrate, meaning that you get the result you want. So even, Ernest Holmes kind of gives conflicting.
Right.
And so I think, you get that idea. But
I think when you look at both, we're experiencing a different reality than Ernest Holmes and Neville Goddard. They were not even aware of the kind of the social media and the different exposure that we're getting. So, we can sit and meditate and do an affirmation for a couple minutes. And then we start thinking in affirmation mode almost of all the negative things for the rest of the day. And if you were to sit and look at a scale, wow, that meditation was pretty good, but you just thought negative thoughts all day long. So for me personally, the repetition is a way of forcing my mind to continually think these thoughts in a string beyond just that one treatment, because I need to change the way I think. That's at least been a personal thing. The repetition forces me to continually think that thought that I want to think, because I can think that thought in a moment, but then I'll think the opposite thought. So it's a way of forcing my the horse to start riding and not stop, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. It's like, you said you personally. And right. I think that, it's what it comes down to for individuals. Like everybody probably has different ideas. Like, yeah, that repetition for me, for the most part, like the repetition is really good. There are times, sometimes when I'll do a treatment and it's kind of trippy. I'll do a treatment and it feels like my eyes are closed, but it feels like I'm somewhere else. It feels, the best way to describe it is it almost feels like I'm turned around inside my body. And so sometimes like a lot of times, like when I'm guiding a meditation, it happens too. I'm kind of like somewhere else. So there's times when I treat and like, I know it. Like, I know I am in, the mind, the one life, that I am that. And then there's other times where I'm in it and not in. So I know that there's sometimes like, yeah, I probably need to go back and, I didn't quite get there. I need to go do that treatment again. Now you asked about affirmations. So I kind of went off a tangent on the
same thing. Yeah, I get it.
The treatments, but I feel like in affirmations that they absolutely are powerful to repeat it, use it as a mantra. But I also do think that it has to be something that you can believe. It's that idea of, if I keep telling myself, I'll go back to the money example just because that's probably the most common, or even like the relationship one. If I keep telling myself like, I have the love of my life, or if I keep, my bank account is overflowing, and then my subconscious like, no, it's not. Haven't you looked lately? If I
Right.
keep, so it's a matter of trying to create the affirmation to, I am moving towards more financial abundance. Ideas are coming to me. I'm aware, I'm on the lookout for ideas coming to me. I know that my subconscious mind is pulling me towards better opportunities, something that can make sense. And then,
Right.
repeat the heck out of it until you.
Now, as somebody that has explored consciousness and thought about it and meditated on it, I would like to get your perspective. If you believe there are higher levels of consciousness that we can obtain, even in this body or other bodies, and if you ever see like the earth shifting to a different level of consciousness, and what your perspective of that is.
That's my thing right now. Absolutely believe in the
Yeah.
idea of, global shift, shift in the collective consciousness. I do believe that we're always on that upward spiral, but I do think also, like right now, that we are in kind of a quickening, or an exponential increase in our frequency that we're experiencing on this planet. Consciousness itself, that just is. I don't think it evolves at all, but what does is our use of it, our knowledge of it, and our deepness in it. And I see people waking up all over the place. I really think like the 60s really planted some major seeds for this movement. And, and it kind of went underground for so long, but it was still there and still happening. And, I love nowadays that, podcasts like you, and there's a lot of like really cool podcasts. I was really into Positive Heads for a while. I don't know if you have pretty
Oh
cool
yeah, that's great.
too. But I mean, we're seeing, just like things like The Secret, like it comes out and now all of a sudden like Law of Attraction is mainstream. And, it had always, at least from like New Thought, 1800s has been there. It's just,
Right.
well, it's even been in the Bible, but, it just hasn't been so mainstream. And like right now between, yoga studios on every corner and movies and books, that people really are waking up. Like meditation is a great example. When you see like Steve Jobs, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, Phil Jackson with the Bulls, a select few people that were starting to bring meditation into professional arenas. And now like sports teams, they all have their mental fitness coaches, like all of them, CEOs, executives, they all have their mindfulness meditation programs. When 30 years ago they were kind of snickered at, people laughed and like, oh, look at the weirdos, the hippies. And now it's like, no, there's something to it, and if you're not doing it, you're falling behind.
It's true. I want to get your perspective of telepathy, which is a part of this. As more and more people meditate, I believe that we become aware of something we already had, this ability to read other people's minds, become be aware of other people's thoughts. But we're at a point where we think they're our own thoughts. Or we just, if you ever just, start meditating, you're aware of your stream of consciousness, you kind of become aware there's this other stream where there may be other thoughts. And this is slowly, maybe not in my lifetime, becoming a mainstream thing where we are purposely being telepathic. I want to get your perspective of that. And do you think we're becoming more telepathic, or are we just becoming better at it? Or do you think it exists?
Absolutely exists. In my experience, it's interesting talking with one of my partners lately on soul evolution. The last month was talking about like vulnerability and authenticity and connection, but what we were kind of like riffing on is the idea of when you go into telepathy, like you have to become very open and very vulnerable to allow somebody to hear your thoughts and for them to share with you. And so I think as we learn to try to create better bonds of communication and connection with those around us, becoming more vulnerable, being more open. We used to always have to wear this mask about, put on the image of keeping up with the Joneses and don't let anybody see your problems. Don't let them see your messy side. And, we're learning more and more, was inspired a lot by Brene Brown, who I, really, really admire, as we're learning, like, we don't have time for that inauthenticity. We need to be our true selves, open up and share it. And then as we do, as we become more open and transparent, I think that's what's going to kind of turn on the switch for people to be more tuned in with telepathy, less guarded.
Right.
And
I think the beginning stages is a sort of empathy that we don't understand, a greater level of empathy where we're feeling the feelings of others, maybe not necessarily the thoughts, or we don't know that they're somebody else's thoughts, but we can definitely feel the feelings, that, at least in my perspective of what my own personal experience is. I don't know what, have you experienced a greater level of empathy that seems to be increasing?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do feel like it is something that's, I don't know if it's happening, globally or not. It seems to be more people talking about it,
Right.
Feeling empathic. And for me personally, yeah, absolutely. That there's times where I know I'm tuning into something that stories in the news, good or bad, like, where
Right.
that emotion and that feeling can be really overpowering. So I think empathy is part of this shift in consciousness that's happening. The new earth is that it's inspiring more people to wake up and take responsibility for those around us, because, when they say, taking care of the others, because really there are no others. Like, we
Right.
are that. We're so interconnected. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes fun to listen to imagine what a planet would be like that knew its true oneness, that it was truly one, and how people would act and think and interact with each other if we all realized, you're me, I'm you, we're all the same. And then suddenly when you see somebody struggling, it's you struggling. So you're going to completely change the way you react and respond to that struggle they're going through, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The masters have taught it, just
The
that
masters
what
have
you
taught
do
it.
for the least of us, you do for all of us. And I love the idea, that yes, we are all one, and at that same time we still have our own individualness. We are still unique in our own ways. Like, a lot of people hear the idea of, we're one, and think that, like, we're going to become like the Borg and just all
Right.
assimilate into the same thing. Like, no, like, the more we lean into that oneness, the more we're accepting and embracing of the things that make us individually unique. And so it's like this flowering, blossoming. Like, right now we're more like the Borg than we would be if we realized our oneness to enable us to express ourselves to our fullest.
It's an individualized oneness, which sounds crazy, but it makes all the sense to me. We are each individualized within a oneness. For some people, that's not going to make any sense, right?
Yeah. Yep. It takes that tuning in and, learning how to, we all have the same potential within us of expression, from the killer to the saint. We all have that full spectrum, and we can, from second to second, minute to minute, express whatever part of that we want. So in that idea that we all contain the infinite, we are truly like all the same. But then while we have this physical experience that we get, I think from time to time, as we incarnate in physical realities, we get to express those different traits and qualities of the infinite to whatever degree and proportion that makes us exactly unique. The way that, it all comes down to its spirit, or whatever you want to call that thing, the one thing. I use the word God or spirit mostly, but it's, just an inferior label. But
Right.
it's just all that thing looking at itself, getting to see itself in its infinite potential. So it loves whatever expression. If it's something that's unique to you, then that's perfect. That's what spirit wants. If you're trying to copy, if I'm trying to act like Brian Scott, then that's not what spirit wants to see. Doesn't want to
Spirit's
see
like, I've already
else.
been there, man.
Yeah.
Want something
That's
new,
what
right?
Brian's doing. Let's see what you got.
Right. So have you had any out-of-body experiences since you started
No.
meditating? No.
No. In the late 90s, there was a couple of us Cheyenne boys that were sharing books and really pursuing astral travel. And no, for me, I at one point I had experienced sleep paralysis. That was
Right.
kind of a trip.
Which is very common. Oftentimes I think that's right at the beginning of out-of-body experiences.
Right.
But people get so afraid of that sleep paralysis that it sort of scares them, and then they step back and they don't want to explore it.
Mm-hmm. It's that letting go. I think that for me, is the hard part. Lucid dreams is probably as close as I've gotten to anything like that. And yeah, that's
when you started having lucid dreams, did you notice you had a more enhanced ability to influence your reality, or your reality would effectively change faster and easier? Does that we're always changing reality. So when I say that, I don't want to, but when I started becoming lucid, I started becoming aware of the dreamlike quality of my waking state. And so it definitely changed me when I really made it a goal. And was that something that you went through as well?
It's hard to say. I didn't necessarily relate it to that. But it did coincide with, changing my beliefs about reality and our ability to influence it. I don't know if I necessarily put it together like that, but I like that thought for sure.
Well, this has been so much fun. Everybody can check out Chris Lahiff, LAHIFF.com. And I'll put the YouTube channel in the comments. You can check out Chris's meditations. It's so cool to be able to talk to the cool kid from high school. And so thank you for coming on. It's awesome to talk to someone from Cheyenne and to relate, because I know the experiences that you've been through. The city that we're from definitely affects our spirituality. It just can't. If you grew up in Cheyenne, no matter what, you couldn't help but affect you, right? So it's good to talk to somebody that's been through a similar upbringing in that environment. Not to say it's bad. I'm just saying it's unique, right?
Oh yeah, it's definitely unique, and you're the cool kid now. So
man, we're both right. So, but yeah, if you're in Cheyenne, come on the podcast. I got Cheyenne people on. Come continue. I only have like one. You're probably one of the only Cheyenne people actually watching the podcast. So maybe Brad, or when he was interviewed, but
I love it.
Any case, I want to thank you so much for coming on, and we'll have to talk some more and check out Chris's stuff. And good luck, man. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Right on. Thank you, Brian.
Welcome to the Reality Revolution.